Hello everybody and welcome. Today we're going to be looking at setting up a Cisco wireless LAN controller and a Meraki cloud-based access point, all using Radius or using Microsoft Windows 2016 server. So the first thing we need to do is actually set up the 2016 server. So I've got the 2016 server here on my main screen. So we need to log in. All right. Now, the biggest thing, I've made the font nice and big, so hopefully it'll show up on the recording. The most important thing is that to note, in fact, I'll bring this up just quickly just to show you, that this server needs certain roles and responsibilities as part of it. Now, you could probably get away with this server just being a member server of domain, but it must have legitimate domain-wide credentials as far as certificates go, because one of the key authentication processes we're going to use requires a certificate. So I made this a domain controller and I installed certificate services just for the sake of it. But if you had a full-blown domain all ready to go, this can be a standalone server. You just have to go to your certificate authority person, or do it yourself if you know what you're doing, and actually get that proper certificate onto your system. Because it needs to be, that certificate, I'm pretty sure that certificate is the most important part of it. You can see here that I've got Active Directory Domain Services installed and Certificate Authority installed. And like an idiot, I left the name a stupid rando IP address before I set the certificate, and I can't change it anymore. So you're going to see when we start doing certificates that it's got a silly name. So I apologize for that. But the next thing I did, so I installed Directory Services and I made a Certificate Authority, so it has a certificate. And then I installed NPS, the Network Policy Server from Microsoft, and this is the key to setting up your Radius server. So here it is here, I've got it on the desktop, so we just double click on the Network Policy Server, and I've made the font size big, so hopefully it's easy to read. So there's multiple parts to this. We have got the Radius clients and services, and we've got the policies. So the way Radius, you've got to remember, the way Radius works is that your devices form a relationship with the server. So therefore, the server has to communicate securely with the devices, and the devices need to communicate securely with your server. So we put constraints and restraints around that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new client. Now, in the real world, what we would do is if we had some controllers, we'd put in their IP addresses. If we had a bunch of access points, we'd put in their individual IP addresses. Or if you had like 300 access points on a couple of subnets, you just put in those one subnets, and you actually create multiple groups. So you make sure that everything's secure, and if anything goes haywire, you can actually remove just one client. So if I was doing this properly, I'd put in at least 3 or 4 different clients and say, this is my Cisco wireless LAN controller. This is a range of Meraki controllers. This is my routers. These are my switches. I put in multiple sets of clients, but I'm feeling a bit lazy, so I'll put in just one group, and I'm going to put in a wildcard because I know that all the networks I've set up here, as you'll see in the diagram when I do that in a minute, that they're all 192.168.something.something. Now we put in a secret key, so our super secret key that we always use. Now, if you've got a really, really ridiculous, crazy super secret key that maybe you're not even meant to know, someone else, an administrator, can set up a policy. So you say use security policy key 7, for example. You don't know what it is, you can't find out what it is because someone else has locked it down, but that's what this field is. And we're going to say okay. So now we've said that devices are going to come to you from 192.168.0.0 and they're going to use this key. So the second thing we need to do is we need to set up the connection profiles. So we go into here and connection profiles. And there's always one, there's always a default one, so we have to create a new one. So we right click and we go new. And we'll call it Cisco Profile 1. That's a good name. And we say unspecified because it's not actually doing any part of the specification. We'll click next. And the conditions. Because remember, this is a policy server and everything's based around policy. And how do we write policies? We write policies based on conditions, restraints. But for this one, we just want any one wireless. So look, we've got username, we've got IP address, we've got all this sort of stuff. But we don't. None of this is super important. We can even have different vendors. But we're going to come all the way down here to the bottom one and go NAS type, and we're going to click on wireless. Now, according to all the instructions I've read, this is enough. But some different people disagree and they say, you know what? There's also this extra setting called wireless other, because sometimes different controllers and different access points, something a little bit different. So we're going to say both, just tick both the wireless ones. So there we have our NAS port, wireless, and we click next. And we don't do authentication here because we're going to do authentication in the next step. And we click next, and we click next, and we say finish. So this one policy, whoops, oh, and we want to move it to the top too. Oh. So this one policy's just got one setting. It just makes sure that the calling station, the client that's trying to connect to the server, is using one or both of these two. Now here's where we create the policies. So once again, there are some default policies. So we right click, we say new. And what we'll do is we'll make two policies because I want to show you the power of the way we're setting this up. So let's make default all users policy. I'm a bit of an old school. I like to put the word policy in my policy statements. I know you probably don't need to, but never mind. So default all user policy. We go next. Now, once again, we need a set of conditions. So the first conditions we want to put is, look here, we've got some groups. Now, I've actually gone to the trouble of creating 3 users, Bob, Frank, and Steve. Now, all 3 of those users are in domain users, but only Steve is in a special group. So we'll add domain users because that is what we want to do. So this is our classic find a group thing. So if we just go domain users, click check names, domain users is done. So that's our domain users. So this is the first condition for this group, is it has to be domain users. Now the second, we want to say access, because you could also work backwards. You could create a whole group of users in here and have a policy that says don't allow access. Oh, we want to say access. We want to say allow. Now we want the authentication types. Now we've got smart card or certificate, PEEP or MS Chat. Smart card or certificate's a bit annoying to set up on the 2 wireless devices I'm going to play with today. So we'll just set up PEEP and we'll just use MS Chat as a fallback. Now, here's the killer. You may have noticed, or you probably didn't notice, that they added just fine. Whereas the first time I tried this, they broke, because if you look inside PEEP and I go edit, it is bound to this certificate. This certificate's the only certificate on the whole box, and I had to create this using the certificate authority function. So if you haven't got this magical certificate already on your Windows server, this isn't going to work. And this is what I accidentally did last year. I forgot about the certificate and I thought I could bluff it, and it didn't work, and it was really embarrassing. But now this is critical. Got to have a certificate. And I'm pretty sure that's just it's because it's a Microsoft version. So PEEP is what it's probably going to use, and this is the second one. And I think we untick chat because we don't want chat. We just want these. It's pretty much going to use those two. There we go. Next. Now we won't worry anything about the time constraints, but you could have time in here. You could have time of day. In fact, what we'll do after this, after we've got it working, is we'll test that out. And the last thing we need to do is you have to add some radius specific criteria. So we go add, and the ones we want to write down the bottom, and they're in the tunnel section. So the first one is the tunnel medium type. Where's that? Tunnel medium type. We go add. Then we go add, and there's only a few options. There's literally only one option. I don't know why that's not the default, but let's click there. So that's set. And the second one we need to add is the tunnel type itself. Tunnel type, add. Once again, it needs to have a value inside it. And this is going to be, no, wrong one, sorry, VLANs. Because we're going to use VLANs, and I'll show you what we're going to set up in a minute. So we click OK, and we click Next. Oops, sorry, close. So we've got the tunnel medium type is that one, and the tunnel type, and we click Next, and we click Finish. So now once again we need that at the top, so we go top, top. So let me just scroll down here and check my cheat notes and make sure that it's got all the stuff that I want. Oops, hang on, see if I can scroll this up. No, I can't scroll it up. No, that's good to go. That's everything we need. All right, so now we've set up a policy. We've set up a simple policy. So let us now go to our wireless LAN controller. It's probably logged me out. No, it hasn't logged me out. Now, right now, I've only got one SSID, and that's a pre-shared key. So we're going to add a new one. So we're going to create a new wireless LAN controller. We're going to call it this one because it's got a silly name, because why not? Silly names are fun. And 3. So it stands for Network Lunchbox, C for Cisco, and .1Q. So we go apply. Now, we're going to put this on VLAN 40 to begin with, because we'll assume that you're just a normal generic student. Now, under security, we're going to say added to .1x, which is the default. That's fine. But more importantly, oh, sorry, I forgot a step. We have to add the servers first. So we're going to go to security. So over here we have our AAA settings. So we have to actually add that radius server, because remember we added it on the server, and now we've got to add it on the controller. So radius authentication, we go new, we go 192.168.80.20, and we put in the lovely shared super duper duper secret. Oops, that I can't type. No, oh, there we go. Remember I said before about the port numbers? So this is 1812. This is what this port expects to be. I'll click apply. And I'll just add accounting as well. I haven't played much with accounting, but we'll put it in anyway. And that way, if we can get accounting to give us anything, I haven't, on other controllers that I've used in the past, the ClearPass and Cisco IC accounting is really easy to find. But I've never looked for it on Windows, so maybe we'll look for that as well. All right. So let us actually make sure that it's happy. It's a little ping button over here. So we go ping, success. All right, so the controller can see this radius box. So we go back to, all right, so the authentication server is set up. So we go back to wireless because that's only, oops, sorry, we go back to WLANs. That's only half done. So we want the .1x, and we need to come into, come on, don't do this. Right. So security, AAA servers, and here now the boxes are good to go. So now we've actually set up to say, when you do authentication, we want you to use, this is your first preference of server, and look, you got up to 6 servers. And just to make things a bit slicker, I'm going to get rid of those 2 authentication methods. So it's not even going to try local, and it's not even going to try LWAP. It's just going to straight up use radius. So let's triple check. We've got added to .1x as our policy. No, 3 is none, and we've got our IP addresses, and we're going to click apply. All right, so that should be good to go. So if I go bring up my little camera tool, so we want the C, Cisco.net1Q, that's the first one. All right, now we're going to username. Now let's put in Frank, because we like Frank. So we go Frank, and we put in Frank's super secret password. And we click join. Now, this is really important. Notice here that we're getting a certificate pushed back at us. And this is the dodgy certificate I made. It's a self-signed certificate, so it's not trusted. but you can see that at least it's certificate. So in the real world, what you would do is you would actually go to the trouble and buy a real certificate and put it on the controller. And when you put a real certificate on the controller, this step you don't get asked, because your iOS automatically trusts the certificate. All right, and it's thinking about joining, thinking about it. Please don't embarrass me. Excellent. Big green tick, and click on information, and we're on VLAN 40. Remember how we said we're going to put this on VLAN 40? Sorry about Plants vs. Zombies 2. I'll use my other hand to stop getting in front of the screen. So this is on VLAN 40, 192.168.40.30, and that's great. So let's forget this network again. Forget. Now we have we've got another user in our business called Steve. So Frank is a student. We don't care much about Frank. Frank can be on student. So we're going to log in now as Cisco again. We're going to log in this time as Steve. Steve. And we're going to log in again as Steve admin pass. Super secret password. Join. Same again, every time you connect. See, every time you connect, you get challenged for that certificate. So that can be really annoying, really fast. So we have logged in as Steve. Now, Steve's a bit more important. Oh, look, Steve's still on VLAN 30 as well. There must be something we can do, right? There must be something we can do. So let's forget that network. And let's now make Steve super special. So let's go back to the Windows, this one. Where is it? This one. Now, let's make a policy for Steve, because we want Steve to be awesome. So we're going to make a new policy. So, you know what? Let's make our life a hell of a lot easier, and let's copy the existing policy, because the existing policy is good. So we're going to duplicate this policy, kapow. Now, let us just add something a bit interesting. So let's call this default. Let's call this user policy for special users. I'm going to enable it now. Conditions. Let's not make it domain users, because I've got Steve, and I've gone to the trouble of putting Steve in a special group called Wi-Fi. I think it's called Wi-Fi users. We'll soon find out in a minute if I've done it right. Oh, what's it called? It's Wi-Fi something. Oh, it's Wi-Fi staff, I think. Let's see. What did I call it? Yeah, I call it Wi-Fi staff. So I've made a special group called Wi-Fi staff, and only Steve is the only member. So now it's Wi-Fi staff. Now constraints are the same. We want all this same authentication, but now under settings, we're going to go a little bit more funky, and we're going to add an extra field. And you might think to yourself, well, what the hell is Josh going to add now? Well, we are going to add tunnel group ID. And we are going to say we need to put in a numerical value. So we're going to put in 70, because we want Steve, we like Steve, and we want Steve to be on VLAN 70. So now we have the same things. We've got tunnel medium type, we've got tunnel private group type, but now we have, sorry, tunnel type, tunnel medium type, and now we have tunnel PVT group ID. Apply. Now, here's a very important step. Notice that this is done in order. So because Steve is special, we need to move him to the top. Move, move, move. So now this group is checked first. So it will check for any members of the group Wi-Fi staff. If you're not in that group, then we'll do the second policy. So let's now bring back up Steve. Being nice to me today. Oh no, we're still on VLAN 40. There's something we forgot. Let's look at this. So VLAN 40, that's correct. VLAN 40. We have to go into here in advanced. Here is the boss of all bosses, because the radius server is pushing back a value, but our security policy on the controller is ignoring that value. So we're going to tick this box and say, you know what? If the AAA server has something interesting that it wants to give us, we're going to accept that information. So we click apply and apply. So theoretically now, if I forget this network and rejoin it, yes, the demo gods are being nice to me today. So, because we've gone to the Radius server and we've added Steve's group and said, if you're part of Steve's group, make you go into VLAN 70 instead, and we've trusted that setting from the Radius server, it's now pushing out. So we are now using a Windows-based Radius server. We're just setting up a bunch of groups. And based on those bunch of groups, we can now populate different users on different VLANs. Now you might think to this, Josh, well, what are you doing? What a waste of time. No, because how many SSIDs have we created? 1. Remember, more SSIDs, slower network. If you got 7 SSIDs, that's too much junk in the air. Don't have 7 VLANs with 7 SSIDs. Have 1 SSID with 7 VLANs. Just have the back end do all the magic for you. So just by way of comparison, let's have a look at how it looks on the Meraki side of things. So here's the Meraki dashboard, and I've got this SSID that I was playing around with. I'm going to completely change it. So we're going to edit. We don't want to use, oh no, first of all, sorry, let's rename it, because that name's, we'll rename it, and we'll call it Meraki.1x this time. So it's going to be the Meraki. We're going to make a Meraki.1x, exactly the same thing. So we go into edit settings. Now currently set to pre-shared key. We don't want that. We want Radius server. Now there is a Meraki cloud authentication, but like I said before, I'm not that big a fan of it because I don't know that I trust my Radius communications going off to the cloud and back again. So we're going to use a local Radius server. Obviously we're using Windows today because it's quick and cheap and fast and easy. But if you've got the money, definitely look at ISE or Aruba ClearPass, because they have OS version, time of day, physical location, MAC address or manufacturer code, and multiple forests, not just one Active Directory, multiple forests, security groups, anything you can imagine. But we're just doing it, so we're just doing it slowly and quietly. So we want a Radius server. So we scroll down a little bit and we find the Radius server, and here it is. I've already played around configuring it, and we go test. So let's test with Frank, because we know Frank works. We go begin. Now I've got 3 of these Meraki access points, but one of them isn't plugged in at the moment. So that's why we always get this lag, because otherwise it would instantly check all of them straight away. So 3 APs, 1 pass, 1 failed, 1 unreachable. But the one that passed is the key, because look at all this stuff here. That has come back from the controller. Let's look at what happens if I change Frank's username to something that doesn't exist at all. We should get an error. There you go. I mean, it got nothing, so it's no good. Now I might. So now just by way of comparison, we'll do Frank again, just so that I can get a good clean screenshot of this. So we've got all of this lovely data. This has been pushed back from the Radius server. But notice it didn't really use any attributes. It just said, yes, you're happy, we're going to use you. By way of contrast, let's see what happens if we do Steve. Because remember, we created that second group for Steve. And this is why I love the Meraki, because this testing engine saves your bacon. Ah, look what happened now. We have got back something that this Meraki cloud is happy with and understands. And the most important thing is this number here, VLAN 70. So now we've proved that not only can we communicate with the radius server, but he's giving us back a value. So I'm going to save this just because I don't want to lose anything. So we scroll back down to the bottom here. So there's our radius server. Now, this is what's important as well, is I've set up this access point bridging, but it's set up as a trunk. So for the Cisco, it's not a trunk. It's a single access, and all of everything goes inside the CapWAP tunnel. So it goes through the air, through the access point, through the CapWAP tunnel to the controller. Then the controller spits it out into whatever VLAN needs to be on. But the Meraki doesn't work like that. The Meraki is an autonomous access point that's cloud managed. So I've run a trunk with all the VLANs up to this access point. And I've said that if you join, that it uses trunking. And I've said when you join this Meraki access point, you are dumped on VLAN 30. So let's actually try that now to make sure that everything works. So I've saved that. I'll save it again just to be sure. That warning is because I've got a appreciate key. This appreciate key is a piece of junk. So let's bring this back up again. The M for Meraki is going to let us join in, and we've got a big tick. So we tap this bad boy. VLAN 30. Fantastic. Now, so this works. So we're on. Now, this is something I changed ahead of time, and I was hoping that it wouldn't work, so I changed it to show you that it does work. But it's because I saved it previously and then I reverted it, it's remembered it. This is the setting. This is the same setting as in Cisco Land. Radius override. Ignore what the radius says or trust what the radius says. So if I forget this network again, and we go info, bang, 70. Because once again, we've told so VLAN 70, because we've told the Meraki that if the radius server goes to all the trouble of actually giving us some VLAN information, we are going to trust that VLAN information. So let's have a quick double check back at the server to make sure we're happy with everything we've seen. So this is the relationship between us and the server, the clients. So the server's got the appreciate key. Then we have a simple request to say the type of authentication request you're going to receive are wireless. We can still use this same server and the same groups and do switch and router authentication. We just have to add another connection policy request to say, you know, you're going to get radius from a switch this time, not a wireless thing. And then we have the policies. So the default policy was simple. We just had domain users, simple authentication, good authentication I should say, and just generic values that may or may not even need to be there and it still would have worked. And then for the special users, we had a different group and we pushed an extra value back at them to say 70. Oh, what's that? See? Oh, that's a chat domain. So that's the user. See, it reached in. It reached in and it got the username. Well, there you go. See, client IP address. It is in there. Remember I said look for client IP address? Client IP address, data, or maybe the data type 3 is important. So, oops, no. So, client IP address. Access client IP address. So it's definitely there. Because remember, because it's coming. That's the information I was trying to check. Because that is what is being pushed back as being I'm the intermediary. So that's the rule, that's the profile. That's Steve again, default user policy, blah, blah, blah. So absolutely, so it's called, all right, so maybe Windows doesn't understand this string, client IP address. Maybe that's my problem. Because I've got access client ID address, and I've got client friendly name. Where was it? Client. Oh shit, it was there. Alright. So we'll get rid of these because they're obviously doing nothing. Alright, so now, and this one, you can go to. Alright, so now we want to see if Steve goes on a VLAN 50. And if he does, then that's awesome. That means you can do, apart from, you could probably do manufactured codes as well if you're super brave. Demo God's going to be nice to... Okay, I can die happy now. There you go. So, you can now use a single, because the question in the chat was, how do you do centralized radius? Well, this is how. You have a centralized radius server and you've got 3 different sites. You put in your restrictions of the client IP range to say, when these guys ask me, put them on this VLAN. When those guys ask me, put them on a different VLAN. So there you go. All right, I'm going to screenshot that because that's awesome. I'm super pumped that that worked because I thought it was possible, but I didn't realize how awesomely possible it is. Oh, thank you, thank you. All right, well, I've pushed this demo pretty much as far as I want, much further than I wanted to. So if you wanted to, oops, sorry, wrong one. I need this one. Click here, and then do this one.
So, thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe, click the notification bell. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, and leave me a comment with what you'd like me to make for my next video. I'll see you in the next one.